Living Room Topography was a song that I listened to recently, and I forgot how much that song, that was the first song I ever released. And that was the song where I finally felt like, this is a Death by Design song. This is me. Now, the songs I recorded before that, a lot of them have been released since, but that was the first time where I thought, this is the real deal. Like, I am making music now that I can hold up next to my favorite bands.
Yeah.
And
such a great feeling, isn't it? To finally sort of get that, where you think, well, that really, really worked. Sometimes it's an accident. You don't really know why it worked so well, but you're aware that it did because it sounds the way that you'd always imagined your stuff would. I don't know if it's the same with you, but for me, the breakthroughs came in a little 5-minute track here. That was really good. What did I do there? And then maybe 6 months later, another little track or another little piece sort of fell into place.
Nice. Yeah. This song here wasn't one of those songs. The song originally I picked was one of those songs. It was like weeks of work and little pieces falling together. This song here was one of those ones that was birthed out of the ether. I didn't get up off the chair till I was done. Like, didn't exist, and it was 8 hours later, I'm done. Now I can go to bed or go to the bathroom, whatever I had to do. And it was one of those cathartic songs that was partly coping with frustration and stress, but it was also me trying to sort of capture the essence of my favorite moment, which is when I have friends in my living room laying around on the floor with headphones on or just with their ears open for the stereo, getting ready to listen to some music for the first time. Right? So the living room topography is a reference of how the living room will looks and feels differently in those moments.
Yeah.
And and I remember being inspired too, because someone who I was hanging out with drank too much and he was laying in his own vomit on my living room floor, and I was disgusted with him. So I was so angry. I was like, I'm just gonna go downstairs and write the music you guys would rather be listening to anyway, or you should rather, that doesn't exist yet, and these are the people probably I was abusing with my music anyway. Like, they probably were losing their minds because I made them listen to one of my albums I hadn't released yet. And they were going like, what is wrong with you? Why do you do this to us?
Yes,
I'm like, isn't it great?
I've had moments like that as well. My friend, my good friend, my oldest friend, Michael, we don't get together so much anymore, but we correspond by FaceTime twice a week, so we see one another, keep up. But he used to come here, nice. And I would have a listening chair for him. And the chair wasn't normally there, but I would put it there and I would measure the distance to the speakers so that he was exactly at the listening point, that equilibrium point where all the bass is balanced and everything. And I would make him sit there and I would make him listen, and which was not something that he ever did, although he's a great music fan. He would listen to music through a tinny speaker. He doesn't care about any of that, but I made him listen to my good speakers, and he would always be very very understanding about it. But I always got the feeling that he'd rather not be doing that, but okay, Yeah. So yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Well, we'll play that one then, shall we? We'll play that, definitely. I've got it here.
Well, I guess you're right. We did talk about it. Might as well.
We gotta go with it now. We gotta go with it now.
All right. Well, this is the first song I ever released under the Death by Design name. The song's called Living Room Topography, and it's off of my album Forever.
So that took you 8 hours.
About that, yeah. It was a one sitting thing.
How long to mix?
Probably more like 20.
Yeah, a lot longer to mix. Yeah, I can imagine how that happens, because I've done similar things myself, and I can see what you're doing to bring all the parts together. But you've got a lot of different parts there. You've got this beautiful sort of tension at the start where you introduce an idea and then it just stops, and there's this beautiful decay, which probably lasts longer than most people would expect it to, which just sort of raises the tension. Then it comes back in, and then that happens maybe 3 times altogether, something like that.
Yeah.
And is that a mouth? Did you play mouth organ on there, or something organic like that? Was there something?
Yeah, it's a harmonica.
Harmonica.
Or no, melodica.
Melodica.
I meant melodica.
The thing with the keys. Yeah. That was brilliant. That gave it a sort of a, and it's panning left and right. I remember, and it's got a kind of mad sort of component to it. But I was getting all of these pictures and things, but they were happening too fast for me to capture. I can't remember them now because it started 14 minutes ago, whatever it was, and they've all gone now. But it was so colourful and so, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm struggling for language with a track like that because there's so much in it. There's so much in it. There was a little ambient noise at one point. When it got quiet, there was a kind of a hissing noise which sounded like it was coming from an amp or something. What would that be? There was like a little...
honestly, I'm not 100% certain where that sound came from. But one thing I do remember about... What's that?
You know the sound I mean, though?
Are you talking about like that slow build in the middle there? Or
No, before...
Static and then eventually comes in?
Before that, it doesn't matter. We get bogged down in these tiny little details. But it's the tiny... Go on.
Oh yeah, I think you're right, because there's a lot of guitar playing going on there, like that, especially in the mellow parts. There's like always like 4 or 5, 6 guitars happening at once. So there's a lot of leakage of the tube amp sound, because I was miking my amp back then.
Yeah,
I wasn't using a lot of modeling software because I just didn't like the way it sounded back then.
I liked that kind of detail. Really, kind of draws the. It sounds like a stupid thing to point out when you've got all of that musicianship going on and say, well, this tiny little sound. But these are the kind of things that make tracks for me, because it's what Zappa used to call the eyebrows to me. It's like these little tiny things that when you're deep listening, you get all of the stuff that's going on and it's all changing because that's the nature of the piece. But then there's this little constant in the background at one point. And then, of course, halfway through, you stop. And, if you don't know what's happening, you're kind of thinking the track's over. But I did open my eyes at that point and I looked and I could see that it wasn't over, so I didn't make a fool of myself. But then that build-up started. That build-up started, and that got quite interesting. And I was thinking about your description of the living room. So that was going through my head, and I was thinking, this is the way my mind works with music. Are these big blocks of sound at the start with the big sort of ambient tail off? There's maybe three of those, I think. Are those like bits of furniture? Is he describing, whether he knows it or not, subconsciously bits of furniture or people or something? And then he lets that one sit, then moves on to the next one. And then when it all stops, it's like you've had enough of describing that, so you go on to the next thing, which sounded, to my insane brain, it was a vacuum cleaner. What had happened was you took me down into the carpet, and then this vacuum cleaner came along, and it was quite terrifying. It was quite like this, and I'm trying to encompass all this. And so in my head I was kind of under the floor at this point, under the carpet, under the floorboards with this vacuum cleaner, and then that stops. Again, that stops. Well, someone switched the vacuum cleaner off, obviously. And then what's under these floorboards? You come in with this piano and this synthesizer with these big heavy drums. By this point, my head's swimming. My head's swimming in the most delightful way. I don't mean that to its detriment at all. It's brilliant, And I can see why you would be pleased with that, why you would say, I've kind of arrived, you know, because there's so much in it. And it's, I have to tell you this, I don't know if you know this, but it's quite unlike anything else. It's not even really like my stuff. We are kind of similar in the way that we work, and I do stuff like that, but the character of my stuff is different from the character of your stuff. That's obvious, because we're different people.
Yeah.
But I couldn't say, oh, that's like I do with everything else that we play in the show. With everything else we play in the show, I'll go, yeah, that's like Henry Cow, or that's like, you know, and it's not to the detriment of it, it just reminds you of it. There was little bits where I thought, well, that sounds like something off a Tangerine Dream album. That little bit for a second or two. But that was about it. That was all the references I got. I wasn't sitting there thinking, counting them off, you know. I was writing notes. Every so often I would wake up and write a little note. And I haven't written anything about what it sounds like, because it doesn't sound like anybody else, which is both a great thing and a terrifying thing. Because it's a great thing because it means that it's quite original, which I think is a great thing, but it's terrifying because how do you get people interested in it if it doesn't sound like anything else? You can't say, oh, this is as good as fill in the blank. It's not. It's a different thing entirely, and it requires a different investment from most of the music that people will hear. My stuff's the same, you know. I do a half-hour long track, which is just all guitars, you know, and I know I'm the only one who likes it, but I'm still quite happy with it. I think it's a great track, and this is the same. I feel I've listened to that track before because I've listened to that album before, but in listening to the album, I probably wasn't deep listening. I was probably, you know, looking at pictures or something. One thing I tend to do when I'm not deep listening, but I'm listening, is I play some kind of game that doesn't involve reading at all. Some stupid, you know, game on the PC. So I'm listening and doing that. So I'm perhaps experienced this that way last time. But this time, wow, it was a different experience altogether. And at the same time as it's utterly baffling in some ways, it's utterly magical as well. It's got both of those things, and that's what attracts me to music. If I listen to a piece of music and it's got that element of magic and befuddlement for me, it draws me in, and it makes me listen, and it makes me try and extract all this. I don't know. I'm struggling for words because I can't just say, "Oh, that's like Zappa," you know, which is easy. It's easy. It's easy to say that. It's a lot more difficult to say it with something that's truly original. So congratulations on that one. That's 14.5 minutes long. Wow, what a piece of work. I really mean that. It was absolutely brilliant.
Well, thank you. I can't remember who. Like I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I remember I shared it with a friend of mine, and they called me back and they were like, "That's my favorite song." And I said, like, "You think that's like my best song?" He's like, "No, I mean, like, it's my favorite song I've ever heard."
Wow. And
I was like, "Really?" And I'm like, "You're not kidding." He's like, "No, I can't tell you the song." And it was funny because, you know, I'm not sure which friend it was, but I remember if it was the same friend I'm thinking of, he used to request it too, and he would talk about the song, about how, you know, because every time I write a new song, he'd be like, it's no living room topography, you know. I'd be like, oh, well, I'm sorry. I'm not going to write another one of those either, because why would I bother, you know? Like it's okay on its own.
Yeah. No, it's a kind of classic, really. I mean, if it's, you know, I mean, I can see why somebody would say that. Somebody who hadn't heard anything like that before, you know, who maybe was a bit of an adventurous listener. I mean, that's a side of an album, isn't it? That's what that is. That's, you know, we were talking earlier about the album format, and that's one side of a vinyl album, and it's perfect for that. You know, I can imagine having that on one side of an album with the gatefold sleeve or the triple whatever it is, you know, and looking at that as you're listening to the music. Yeah, I mean, if that had been made in 1974, everybody would know what it was. Do you know what I mean?
Well, Tales from a Topographic Living Room?
It could be, yeah. It could be. Oh, that was fantastic, yeah.
Thank you, Peri. I appreciate that. I really do. One of the ones on your list that I think is a delight to the ears was the is it Encounters? Is that one there? Yeah, the Psychological Acoustics headphone album.
Yes.
By Doug Woods.
Yeah, let's do that one because, that was what I was going to suggest anyway. Doug Woods. Perfect. So who's Doug Woods? Doug Woods has a YouTube channel called The Sound Test Room. And when I was making most of my music on the iPad, because for 10 years that's what I did. I did almost everything on the iPad. Which was a great way of making music. The way touch instruments work on the iPad is just an act of genius. I'm so grateful to Apple for that. There's lots of things to be angry with Apple for, but their iPad and the way that they delivered the musical side of the iPad for creative people was just amazing. And Doug still runs a YouTube channel that concentrated on, not exclusively, but concentrated on iPad apps and how-tos, how to do things on the iPad. So that's where I met him, and we did kind of work together once or twice. I think once I did a track with him, something that he had done, and I sampled it, and we worked that way. So I know him through his channel, and he's from Liverpool. I think he's not from Liverpool now, but that's where he comes from. I think he lives down in the southwest of England, but he's originally a Liverpudlian. So he's got that great Liverpudlian sort of sense of humour, and he's a real character. And he produces a kind of wide variety of music, all of which I would say is prog. He's a keyboard player. I think he plays guitar a little bit as well. But everything he does is like keyboard based. And not all of it's to my taste, I'll be honest. Not all of it's to my taste. Some of it's a bit too much like Genesis or that kind of prog, that very symphonic kind of tonality, which is what comes easy to him, I guess. But I love this album because it was ear candy for me. It's all these different sounds and things. So this is an interesting album because it's got a very interesting name, the Psychological Acoustic Headphone Album. So it's meant for listening in headphones, which is the way I prefer to listen, and it's just filled with these magical sounds. It's like he's gone through the presets of like 1,000 synthesizers that just sort of made all this work. I really like this. So we'll play that now. This is Encounters from the Psychological Acoustic Headphone Album by Doug Woods.
Nice. So, yeah, I love that kind of stuff a lot. I found it fascinating that there wasn't any melody till you were 2/3 of the way into the song.
Mm.
You know, which I think melody's kind of becoming overrated. I mean, I shouldn't say becoming overrated. Like, I think we've talked about this before, that I find myself much more inclined to find originality inside of timbre than the melody.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, especially with Western music. Now, mind you, when the melody came in, that wasn't Western music. It sounded either like he was intentionally detuning every note or was microtonal. I couldn't quite tell.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, which is one and the same, essentially. I mean, there's no, once you start blurring the lines, there's no rules. But it was, and I can't tell if that was all electronic or not. And I'm guessing by psychological acoustics, I'm wondering if it sounded like there was one of those vibroslaps being used incorrectly at one point.
Mm-hmm.
It sounded like there was a coin being flicked, and you could hear it moving from the left to the right. It was it was part of it was almost like the mechanism was dropping pieces of metal. It was it was very industrial in that sense without being industrial music. It was very psychedelic without, again, being music. It was my kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's like, it reminds me of Stockhausen, some of the stuff that Stockhausen talked about. A lot of what Stockhausen actually ended up doing was pretty unlistenable, really, in my opinion. But he used to talk about things in the most wonderful way. And to me, Doug's managed to capture the spirit of that kind of, the adventure of that kind of music, just tonality for the sake of tonality, and the way that tonalities intermingle and change over time. So it reminded me of that, and in a way it was it was like all those synthesizer patches that you can't use anywhere except in a piece like that, because they're going to take over.
Yeah.
They're going to take over. They're multi-timbral in themselves, and they're doing lots of things. And at the end, I loved the broken orchestra at the end. It sounded like an orchestra that you're looking at in a mirror, and the mirror's been shattered, so the orchestra's doesn't look right anymore. I love that piece. It's absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
It is. I know that's definitely not for the, like, my music is alienating. That music's extra alienating, because most of my friends wouldn't tolerate that. They might listen to that song and be like, okay, we're done with that now, right? Whereas, and that happens sometimes. I remember having one of those living room sessions with some friends one time, and I just got my hands on a free copy of Oxygen by Jean-Michel Jarre.
Oh yeah.
And I'd never heard that album before. Never heard of Jean-Michel Jarre. It was a free record. I was going through, a retired DJ was giving rid of his records, and he just basically said to me and my friend, like, take whatever you want. And I'm pulling like London Is Calling by The Clash and Elvis records, and there's Madonna records. I got Michael Jackson's Thriller, like pristine, out of there. And that was there. And my friend goes, he about ripped it out of my hands, like, I'm taking that. And I said, really? I like the looks of that album. He goes, you don't know Jean-Michel Jarre? I said, no. He goes, never mind, you take it. You need it more than I do. And and I listened to it with my wife, my buddy Drew. The three of us listened to it, and we listened to the first side, and it did things to me like that does, like that thing there. Like, it's like it's almost more experimental than it is melodic, right? And just all these sounds happening and just cascading over you like warm water, And after the side was over, I got up like fast, like I jumped out of my seat. I couldn't wait to flip the record over. And both my wife and Drew were like, are you kidding me? Like, you're not joking. You're not seriously going to listen to side 2, are you?
Really? Really?
Yeah. And I was like brokenhearted, and I still give it to them. Like, I put Jean-Michel Jarre on, I'm like, this is the album you guys refused to listen to. But
well, it was a big album here. It was a big album here. They had, so he didn't have a single in the charts over there where you are.
Well, they might have, but I wasn't born yet. So I'm not sure.
Okay, right, fine, all right. That's what we're dealing with, right? Sorry, I forgot that aspect. You weren't around.
It's okay. It's all good.
Yeah, no, he had quite a big hit with Part 6, I think. My wife loves that album.
Okay.
She was listening to it the other day. I came in and said, oh, that's Jean-Michel Jarre. There's that and there's Equinox, which are very similar, recorded in the same kind of way. But yeah, I know what you mean.
I had that too.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There's that kind of there's all those little sounds and things that Jarre puts in, which he never really went back to, and he moved on to, he got very digital and very sort of clinical in his sound, and the analog sort of stuff disappeared a little bit, so I kind of went off him. I had a couple of his albums, but yeah, they didn't hit me the same way. Another album that's like that is Michael Honig's Departure from the Northern Wasteland. Have you heard that?
I haven't, no.
That's a good one in that vein. It's a good sort of synthesizer-y, sort of trippy kind of thing. Yeah.
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah, this.
Yeah, like for me, it's like in that category, I get like Vangelis, right, and Giorgio Moroder, Wendy Walter Carlos. Sorry, so let's just say Wendy. It's not appropriate to. and I have a lot of respect for Wendy too, because she didn't jump on a bandwagon or do it while it was trendy. I bet you it was really hard for Walter to become Wendy at the time.
Yeah, well,
and So
the album was Switched on Bach, wasn't it? Which I never really liked. I don't like the.
I couldn't stand that album.
Nah.
I have both of them too, 1 and 2.
Yeah, I don't like that sort of
but
folk classical stuff.
But the Clockwork Orange soundtrack though turns my crank.
I don't know that one.
That's the one that did it for me.
I don't know that one. I need to look into that.
There's a classic rock radio station in Toronto that used to do psychedelic Sundays from noon to 6 p.m. every Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And the DJ, Andy Frost, who is like the biggest reason I ever wanted to work in radio, whenever he introduced the show, Psychedelic Sunday, he had the opening theme from Clockwork Orange by Wendy Carlos playing behind him. And
right.
So when I saw Clockwork Orange for the first time years later, I was like, oh my God, that's that sound I've been hunting for years. It's on this. And of course, that album you still can't stream it. Like if it's taken down on YouTube constantly, you have to actually buy or steal a copy of that album if you want to listen to it.
All right. Okay. That's a challenge then, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'll make that something I'll do this evening or later on.
But my favorite one in that era would probably be the Isaiah Tomita. He always does it for me the best. I don't know what it is about Isaiah, but he does it right, I think. The approaching the synthesizers as if it's an orchestra, you know, and when you look at his album, like he looks at a song and he credits every synthesizer. Like it's like I was using a mini Moog this and a Korg MS whatever this and and he's got like 16 to 18, 20 different synthesizers for every song, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's, to me, I find that takes a lot of respect. And even like often we'll put the settings too. So if you have a modular setup at home, like Isaiah, you could actually just look at the liner notes, set up all your things. And then if you have the musical mind, you could perform his songs. Yeah. Well, they're not his songs usually. They usually covers he's doing, but
he did the Firebird. Is that one of his?
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Firebird Suite.
Yeah, these are things I need to go and listen to because that's Stravinsky. So Stravinsky's beginning to get interesting for me. The 20th century music starts to get interesting about the time of Stravinsky, and then you get Webern and Berg and all these guys, you know, and then all of that sort of transfers into modern film music. I don't know if you followed that kind of thing, but to me the best of 20th century classical music is actually in film music. That's where it went. That's where the money was. So that's where all these guys went. You know, not just John Williams and you know Horner and people like that, but people like Carter Burwell. You know, and there's a few others who probably wouldn't have got a look in on the classical side of things, but they certainly made a huge difference in the cinema. You know,
absolutely. Like Clint Mansell's one of my favorite film composers, and he's known for that song called Lux Eterna. That was It's been used in several movies, but he wrote it for Requiem for a Dream.
Yes.
Have you ever watched that movie?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Very tragic movie, but you may have not seen it then, because I can't see you not remembering that movie. Because like it takes all the dirty parts of Train Spotting and turns it up to 10.
Right.
You know, because I know you're not a fan of Train Spotting, but that was like my introduction to independent movies, right? Like that was my first, like this is a gritty, non-Hollywood kind of movie. And Requiem for a Dream is probably the second movie I bought around the same time, and it was all about heroin and drugs again, and about people dealing with the streets and struggling between being addicted to a drug and being homeless and taking care of yourself, you know. And then Train Spotting has like this weird sort of like anticlimactic sort of like some people get away with it, some people don't. The kind of life goes on, whereas Requiem for a Dream is just like tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, and you just like you can't help but just like you just sit in silence going like what in the you just feel terrible at the end of the movie. But it's a Herbert Shelby Jr. novel, which his books are like that. They're like William S. Burroughs kind of darkness, you know, but like a Philip K. Dick kind of sophistication. If you can consider that sophisticated. I think Philip K. Dick is sophisticated.
Yeah, I can see that.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that song.
Yeah. That sparked a good discussion, actually. That was good, yeah.
This band was introduced to me by a friend who hadn't even heard them yet. He was in a record store and saw this album on the shelf and thought it was a cool album title and a cool album cover, so took a picture of it and just texted it to me. And I thought, cool, I'll check it out. And I went listen to it, And it was like a month or two later, I called my buddy and said, "Hey man, that Causa Sui band you recommend is great. I got like 3 of their records now." And he's like, "What are you talking about? Causa Sui? What is that?" And I said, "That band you introduced to me. Like you sent me a picture of their album cover." He's like, "Oh, I thought it was a cool album cover. So they're good, are they?" And I was like, "Yeah, they're great. You're welcome, I guess." And so it's neat because this is one of those bands where I don't know for sure, but I say like I don't know if they. To me, they sound like, if I was going to compare them to one band, it'd be Caius, the band from before Queens of the Stone Age. Like they're those teenagers jamming in the desert, which was kind of like I told you, my reverse introduction to krautrock was through desert rock and stoner rock. So these guys are definitely a stoner rock band, krautrock, psychedelic, whatever you want to call it, and a bit of post rock, which I don't know if you listen to the post rock genre, but I got really heavy into post rock there for about 5 years. And a lot of post-rock bands here in Canada, so it was easy access too. Mm-hmm. Montreal is like bursting with post-rock bands. But when you look at like their influences, they cite bands like Can, Papa Vu, Allman Brothers, Miles Davis, Gabor Sabo, Tame Impala, right? So they don't mention Caius, so I don't know if that's because they don't want to say it because it's too on the head, or they really have never heard Caius before. Because I mean, Caius is kind of an obscure band. You know, they kind of came and went in the early '90s. You know, They never had any major label releases, right? And most people I know who listen to Caius got into Caius because of Queens of the Stone Age, and they're just looking for more Josh Homme music, you know. But anyway, these guys are like the perfect jam band. The guitar player is a wizard. You know, he's lands somewhere between Jerry Garcia and Jimi Hendrix, with his own kind of flair, you know, and they're fluid. The band just pulsates with life, and you know, there's no overdubs by the sounds of it. There might be multi-tracked, but it's only because it's easier to record that way. Mm-hmm. They're playing live off the floor all the time. Most of their albums are actually live albums, and they're one of those bands that they mix. Like the lead guitar player, his name is Jonas Monk, and he's got his own project called Jonas Monk, you know, and he's also in another band called, I think Mythic Starship or Mythic Sunship or something like that. And they're all under the same label. And the drummer, Jacob Scott, has his own project just called Jacob Scott, which is like groove synthesizer music. So it reminds me of Tame Impala and King Gizzard that way, where it's like these group of guys that all have their own bands and they all kind of support each other. Whereas the main band kind of brings the money in, whereas I think Causa Sui would be the band that holds up the entire record label, El Paraiso Records, which gave us permission for the entire catalog, so we have a lot of gold amounting here, which is nice. Yeah, and so they're one of the first ones I thought of, because I thought, you know, these guys are independent. They're like Ipecac Records. They don't seem like they take advantage of the musicians they work with. They want you to shine, and the better you shine, the better they do, right? So
cool.
I think it works. So this is the song called The Juice off of Euphoria Tide. And you know what? I don't know why I picked this song. I like the whole album, so I probably just picked a song that I thought was an appropriate length, listened to it, and went, this song's great. Let's play this one. So I'm not married to any of their songs. They all kind of fit together, and they all belong on the Eyebrow.
They all belong on the Eyebrow. I like that, yeah. that last little noise fades away. Wow, that was very dreamy. That was very 60s, 70s. I can definitely see and hear the krautrock influences there. I would say more like a kind of Fausty kind of sound than Can on the krautrock side of things.
Okay.
Yeah, more. Yeah,
I can hear that.
Yeah, but absolutely beautiful. I was desperate to do vocals for that. I was if you hadn't been here, I'd have been singing with that, because that is just, that cries out for, I can hear exactly how the vocals would go, where they would come in, where they would come out. I don't have any words, but the same sort of thing that I did with Stranger in My Town. Whenever I hear instrumental music like that, I start to put. I'm doing that all the time now. I'm starting to sing with it. But regardless of that, it was beautiful. Yeah, I would say it's it's got a kind of dusty flavour to it. It's the production's a little bit compressed. It's a little bit sort of squashed on itself, but it's got that kind of dusty flavour. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a beautiful production. It's just that it's got that kind of, there's that swimming sound in the background that starts the piece off and then finishes it as well. But it's there throughout, coming in and out. And there's the sort of mellotron-y type thing happening as well. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. It was really good. Yeah, very beautiful. That's another bloody album I'm going to have to buy.
Maybe. You know what? I mean, I wouldn't say no. But their newest album is fantastic.
Oh,
I would not to steer. I got a great deal on some of the records because they've gone up in price. It might be cheaper over there because they're always coming from Denmark.
Right.
I think they're from Denmark.
Are they from Denmark? Wow.
Yeah. I think it's Denmark. I think that's where they're from. Let's see here, just to make sure I'm not. Yeah, Denmark.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So like I got one of their live album. I got the live album from that tour, double album for like $8.
Wow.
On sale.
Right.
Normally like $50.
Right.
So I obviously buy them all up, whatever you can. I just find I feel guilty every time I show you something. Like, oh, this is the CD. I know you like collecting CDs.
Well, I like collecting CDs, so I mean, it's no trial to collect them. I'm always looking for new things to buy for my curated collection. as I grandly call it. That was great. I think that's a good way to finish off this section, don't you?
I think so. I figured that was a nice sleepy song to put us to bed.
Yeah. We've been in a roller coaster tonight, haven't we? Really. I think so. Yeah. We've had a whole bunch of different stuff tonight. It's been great. It's been fantastic.